Hey guys, and welcome to Betwixt the Books. We're doing another discuss. Madness. Wild. What? um, as the title might suggest, today we're going to be discussing pen names and why authors use them and just the nonsense that has been going on. Because sometimes we get it. Sometimes we don't get it. Like, weird choice, but okay. All of this sort of came about for a couple of reasons. One, Gretchen and I have been noticing a trend where a lot of YA authors are starting to write adult books using their actual names. It isn't one of those things like this author is also famous in YA under this name. But this discussion came up, I think because Mari Ness from My Name is Mari Ness made a video where she was discussing who she thought Rebecca Morrow actually is. Like, this went around on TikTok when Corinne first came out. This is Corinne, if you didn't know. And like somewhere on here it says, hold on, in the back, Rebecca Morrow is a pseudonym for a New York Times best-selling author. And that's all you get to know about Rebecca Morrow. It doesn't even have like a fake author bio. It's literally just this is another person who's really good at selling books. That's all you get to know. And obviously when that happens, people start to try and figure out who is the actual author here. I'll let you go watch Mari Ness's video so that you can see who Mari Ness thinks that it is. I know that one of the popular theories was that it was Stephanie Meyer, who wrote Twilight. I'd also seen people mention that it was maybe Jodi Picoult, which is hilarious because it's blurbed by Jodi Picoult, because so that kind of like it's like, I'm gonna blurb my own book and no one will know. Would have been hilarious. We still don't have official confirmation on who Rebecca Morrow actually is, but I agree with Mari Ness on who she thinks it is, just based on the evidence that she was able to find and sort of put forward. It's like pretty clear, I think, who actually Rebecca Morrow is. So yeah, we wanted to talk about pen names today. It was sparked by this book. Obviously I bought it, so I'm interested in reading it. Will I get to it anytime soon? Don't know. Couldn't tell you. But if I do, I can maybe talk about this book, because I have read other books by the author that we think it may have been by, and I can maybe talk to whether or not I agree with that once I've read it.
I love how you're just being super opaque. Like, it's about like, just go watch the video, guys. We're not gonna talk about it here.
I'm trying to be. It's not my theory. Like, I didn't come up with it. I would like to give views to the person who actually came up with this theory. Go watch Mari Ness's video. I'll link it up above. You can go watch it.
Well, yeah, and then don't watch me. I'm having quality control issues with my camera. We're just gonna ignore it because, as my shirt says, I am currently exhausted by existence. So, yeah, sorry about how like different I look to Michaela right now, but this is just what's happening in this life. And I, in particular, have been very fascinated with the pen name, specifically because, like Michaela said, there are a lot of YA authors that are writing adult books. And many of them aren't changing their name. And in particular, there is one person that I read as a YA author who is now writing adult books, who has changed their name in like, or used a different name, I should say, in like the weirdest way possible to me. And I just keep talking about it every time we bring this up, because I'm just like, I don't get it. I don't. So we should say that there may very well be like a really, really obvious answer to all of this, like up in the publishing world. We don't know it, and we just want to talk about books. So we are not publishing professionals, and we are not privy to anyone's like marketing decisions. We're just gonna talk about it. It's gonna be great.
Yeah. So when we talk about this, the obvious reason why somebody would have a pen name is that they want to keep their readership separate. Is that somebody has a specific genre or area that they're writing in, if they don't want those readers to pick up the next book that they publish, if it's like super different from what they normally write. So the example that we gave that we totally understand, if you didn't know, this is T. Kingfisher. We have a review up of What Moves the Dead. This is adult horror. but T. Kingfisher writes children's books under the name Ursula Vernon. I'm pretty sure Ursula Vernon is her actual name and T. Kingfisher is the pseudonym, but it could be vice versa. But it makes sense, right, as to why you wouldn't want children who are reading these middle grade books or chapter books. I don't even know what age bracket they are. They're children to accidentally pick up adult horror just because the author's name is the same. Like, this book is quite small. It's a novella. Like, it could be reasonably confused for a children's book if you didn't, look at the goriness on the cover. There's children's horror. Like, you could see it. I understand writing under a pseudonym for that case of like, I don't want kids to pick up the book if they are reading my other books because they're just going to search by the author and then find this and then read it, and it's very different. Totally understand keeping that readership separate. You could make the same argument for going from YA to adult of saying like, in theory, YA readers are younger. They're children, 12 to 18, although YA is quite often also read by adults. I may not want my YA audience to pick up my adult stuff. Like, I could totally understand these YA authors doing that. But then we have the same sort of thing. We have Kiersten White, who writes sort of fantasy adventure / retelling books. This is Guinevere Deception. It's YA. Come out with an adult horror book, Hide. Same author name, Kiersten White. Now, again, you could make the argument that like there are a lot of adults that read YA, and so maybe she's less scared of that crossover. Two, it's really hard to confuse these two things. Like, this looks like a horror book and this looks like a fantasy book. Like, you can see the difference between them. Obviously, this is shelved in adult versus YA, but keeping the same name in that instance.
And something with Kiersten White that always struck me too was that, so I own a lot of Kiersten White books. I really like her writing. I haven't read one in a while. But when I first started reading her stuff, she was publishing this series called Paranormalacy. And that was very much like a Buffy the Vampire-esque story with like a girl who had like a bedazzled taser named Tazy who like tracked down Yeah, I know. It was great. I loved it. Her name was Evie. It was great. I love those books. And then one of the last series that I read by her was a gender bent Dracula retelling.
Nice.
And that was technically YA, but it was quite dark. And so I think with an author like Kiersten White, there's kind of like a continuum where if you have been reading her more recent stuff, even though it was YA, was quite dark. And so even though it was YA dark and now she's writing adult dark, like I can kind of see that trajectory. So that was
and
one
obviously thing. I haven't read this. It's one of the books that I've picked up for us to possibly do a later discussion where we read some of these adult books and let you know whether we feel like they feel like YA plus, like they're like read like YA but are just darker or has sex scenes or whatever it is that makes it adult versus YA. It's something that we're interested in and we'll probably do in the future. So like,
and that's
there's more to this.
Yeah, the potential argument too, right? Is that like, if you're just transitioning up a step, like you're not changing genre, like the T. Kingfisher to Ursula Vernon thing, like that's like not just multiple a different age bracket. It's like multiple staircases of like difference in genre. But some of the people that have been doing some of the YA authors transitioning to adult, it's the same genre, right? It's still like a fantasy romance situation, but they're just moving it up. And like Michaela said, maybe it's because they wanted to do like more like explicit sex scenes, more romance, more gore, whatever it is, that just moves it out of the YA age bracket, which is quite amorphous anyway.
Yeah.
Just like basically it's about the age of the protagonist. Also, maybe they just wanted to write a story that wasn't about a teenager, right? Maybe they wanted to have their main character be 20 or 30, and that just naturally moves it out of YA. But because it's so similar in style to their other stuff, they can bring those readers along with them. And also authors like Holly Black, for example, who just published an adult fantasy book, she's been publishing for so long that the readers that started with her as tweens or teens are now adults. And so it also makes sense for people who've been in the game for a while as they transition up because they want to keep those readers. So that makes total sense to me. I get it.
Yeah.
I would love to tell you about one I don't get though.
Do it.
So, as we all know, I read a lot of romance now.
What?
Okay.
What?
And as we may know, longtime viewers of this channel, I used to read a lot of YA. So when I say that like these authors that are now publishing these adult books, like I genuinely feel like in a way they're doing it for me, right? Because I was a teen reading these books, and now a lot of the authors that I love have moved into adult. And I remember that I got really, really excited when Rachel Hawkins, who wrote the Hex Hall series a very long time ago, was a YA series that I absolutely adored, announced that she was going to write an adult book. And I was like, hurrah. And then she was like, it's going to be a thriller. And I was like, no, thank you. That's just, I nothing against the genre. It's just not what I like to read. And it also, to me, just seemed like very different. It was like when Stephanie Perkins went from writing Anna and the French Kiss to her adult or her young adult, like horror thriller books.
Someone inside your house, or there's someone inside your house. Yes.
Yeah. Which is still within YA. She kept her, her same name on the docket, but I was like, that is a really abrupt shift for me, and I am not going to follow where you lead. So I didn't pick those books up, and I was like, well, I'm just going to have to love the YA stuff that she read. She's doing adult thrillers now, and she's gone somewhere I'm not going to follow. And so last year, 2 years ago now, I got a ARC for a book called The X-Hex. And it was an adult witchy romance that I read and quite enjoyed. And you can watch my review of that on the channel if you haven't already. And I also reviewed the second book in that series. But the reason that I got really excited about it at first, I wasn't going to request it. I was like, witchy romance is not necessarily my thing. I tend to read a lot of contemporary. And then I click on the Edelweiss description, and it's like, author Aaron Sterling, who is author Rachel Hawkins, writing as Aaron Sterling. So like, it's the first line of the blurb. First of all, we are not hiding this in any way. But X-Hex is basically just upgraded Hex Hall, right? It's like very similar, just for adults with like naked bits. And so I'm just like, why is this where you change your name or use a pseudonym? Because like I almost did not pick that book up. The only reason I picked it up is because in the blurb it said that that was Rachel Hawkins, and I was like, now I'm here.
Yeah.
But now she's publishing all of her romance under Aaron Sterling, and I'm just like, that to me just seemed weird. Like, there are readers that would have followed you that aren't now.
Yeah.
Potentially. Like, I don't know. That flummoxes me to this day. I don't get it.
Do you know if the Hex Hall books are still in print, or if they have gone out of print? Because there's the thing of like, if her YA books have become so old that they're not in print anymore, and like modern readers aren't going to know those necessarily or remember them, and her modern readers know her as a mystery thriller writer, then she might want to keep those two separate. Maybe
that is the most logical explanation for that I've heard of.
Yeah, that's the only thing that would make sense.
No, it makes sense because I don't think the Hex Hall books are still in print. But if the argument for why people like Holly Black and Kirsten White aren't changing their name, right, or using a pseudonym because they want to bring their readers along with them, like as they go up the age bracket.
Yeah.
And I mean, what you're saying makes total sense to me. And marketing wise, I bet you why. Because also, like if a book has been out for 2 years, it's old, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if a lot of people know this, because I used to get this question at Barnes and Noble a lot, and they were like, well, this book isn't really even that old. Yeah. And I'm like, well, if it didn't have a large print run, it's already gone.
Yeah.
That's just kind of how publishing works now. So it would make sense in the kind of like immediacy of publishing to do that. But like I said, I loved her books, and this was like, it's adult Hex Hall, and I almost didn't read it. So I don't know, there's pluses and minuses to that.
The only reason that I sort of know that as like a thing is because of Shannon McGuire. Because Shannon McGuire only writes adult as far as I'm aware. But
there's another pseudonym out there hiding.
Listen. I first read her when our book club did Every Heart a Doorway by Shannon McGuire. This is like cozy portal fantasy. There's some darkness to it. There's a murder mystery in this, but it's, relatively lighthearted as it is, kids that have fallen through doorways into other worlds, fantasy, and have come back to the world and are struggling to reacclimate into just normal old world. But she also is quite popular as Mira Grant. Into the Drowning Deep got popular on TikTok, I think, last year. That's one of my favorites of hers that I read previously. This is Final Girls, one of her earlier novellas. And she had talked about why she published under a pseudonym. Mira Grant books are quite dark horror, like gore, like very blatantly, this is horror. This is got some darkness. There's a murder mystery, but not to the extent that a Mira Grant book has, right? This would have been true except for the fact or like this is true, like that's why she does it, except that she has also now published cozy fantasy under the name of A. Deborah Baker. And this is simply because this series, Over the Woodward Wall, exists inside of the universe of Middle Game by Shannon McGuire. And then she wrote the books that were featured in here. In here, there's like physics stuff that goes on, and different classes of physicists hid their findings inside of children's books. So like the magic in The Wizard of Oz, for instance, is like actually secret codes for how to learn how to do physics. And then a like rival physicist wrote Over the Woodward Wall, which is the same sort of portal fantasy type thing. Suddenly Gretchen has brightened. It's because we're troubleshooting. We're troubleshooting.
I'm just sitting here in the dark, guys. It's fine.
Yeah. But this book itself, entirely reasonable to be a Shannon McGuire book. Like, it didn't need a pseudonym, and I think the only reason it has a pseudonym is because it had a pseudonym when she was talking about it in this book. Like, this book didn't exist first, this one did, and it talks about this book as if it did exist, and now this book exists. So it's actually a series. There's a bunch of them. If you
So can I tell you my really embarrassing Shannon McGuire story?
Yes, go for it.
So I met her at a con, or she was at a con where I was at, like, this is over a decade ago now. And I did not know that she wrote under multiple names, and she was signing books, and she was signing both books.
Right.
And I genuinely had a moment where I thought, this woman is signing another person's books. Like, this is really weird.
Weird.
I had to have it explained to me that like it's the same person.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah,
pseudonyms.
that was awkward. And I think it's funny when you brought, because I didn't know obviously that book was Shannon McGuire, but I think it's funny also when you put that in the context of like Rainbow Rowell, who like also wrote a book mentioned in her own book.
Yes.
But published the book under her own name.
Yeah.
And
did she name, I haven't read Fangirl. Did she name an author on the Simon Snow series in that book, or did she just call it the Simon Snow series?
It has been so long since I read Fangirl.
Okay.
And I will stand on this hill, which is that when Fangirl was really, really popular, I read Eliza and Her Monsters by Francesca Zappia, I think. Last name I'm more confident about than the first. But I like Eliza and Her Monsters better. It's a very similar story. And that was not a popular time to have that opinion, let me tell you. So not that Fangirl is a bad book. I just liked Eliza and Her Monsters better. But anyway,
I've read
don't come for me, internet.
I read the first Simon Snow book like in one sitting, like consumed it. Just like inhaled. So I get why, like, she is the definition of compulsively readable. You know, that nonsense thing that people put in blurbs? Rainbow Rowell, compulsively readable. You will sit down and fly through her book and have zero issues. Never get bored. Just go through it. There's the who's that author that's two women in romance? That's obviously a pseudonym for both of them.
Christina Lauren.
Yeah.
Well, and actually, I mean, romance is filled with people writing under pseudonyms, and you don't really know who they are. So like Christina Lauren is open about the fact that they're two people.
Yeah.
But there are other ones that I have read where they are like, so and so is a combination of two best-selling romance authors. Like there's a lot of them. And until you really start like reading the blurbs, I really didn't realize how many of them there were. Particularly I find in like the books that get released on Kindle Unlimited. Okay. And I don't know if it's just because like, you know, that's an easier space to do that in, but the more like I always read the blurb now or the author bio, because I'm like, is this a real person? Yeah, real person's name, I guess. Because then I'm like, why will you not name who you were a combination of? Because if I really liked this book and I knew that I liked this book, then I would go read your
other stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, like I get it. Okay, so maybe you write literary fiction, right? And you're known for your literary fiction and you really want to write a romance. And you publish that under a different name and you don't want those to be connected. Like, fair. I can understand a situation where that exists. But if you are two romance authors who are already writing romance and then you write another romance novel, just tell me who you are.
It's not like embarrassing.
Right? Like, I would go and read like the work that you write on your own.
Yeah.
Like just let me at it.
I do Alexis Hall that wrote boyfriend material, is that right? Am I naming that? I feel like that's correct. I may be wrong, but I feel like that's correct. I know that that's also a pseudonym, but that Alexis Hall publishes all of their books under Alexis Hall. It's just they don't want like people in their real life to know that they are Alexis Hall. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, that's just like, in a way, I find that unfortunate because of how like stigmatized romance can be.
Well, like the thing that we don't talk about a lot is despite romance being like one of the biggest genres in publishing, because obviously all of us bored housewives just want to have a little spice in our life and we read romance. Despite that being like a huge like money maker for publishers, like a lot of people can't subsist off of writing, like even big like boyfriend material was super popular. It was a TikTok book, but I know that part of the reason why Alexis Hall doesn't write under their own name is that they have like a day job that they work. Like you can be a best-selling author and still have to work a day job 9 to 5 to like support yourself. That's just the case. Like we think of authors as like these people like Stephen King, who just gets up and writes however many pages he writes every day and then reads and does whatever else for the rest of his time. But not everybody is gajillionaire because they write like the best-selling thrillers every single time. Not everybody's James Patterson, who can employ a legion of other authors to write your books for you.
There's like multiple high rises filled with like people. I picture them on typewriters. I'm sure they use
week.
Like
new James Patterson out. Disgusting.
Well, but at least I mean, that's a whole other like side note, like
ghostwriters.
Ghostwriters, but also like, you know, when it's like James Patterson and you're like, yeah, I think the and did more of the writing, but like
I think James Patterson did an outline or like here's the concept. Well, here's my idea. You write it.
Yeah, and I mean, I was a huge fan of Clive Cussler too, and he was turning out all of these books. You know, R.I.P. Clive, but you know, he was turning out all of his later books with a writer, another writer named And I just think that that's so funny because I think I like literally accidentally broke a lady's heart once when I was like, yeah, like James Patterson doesn't actually really write these anymore. And she was like, what are you talking about? I love his writing. And I was like, no, like it's not how his business model works anymore. I mean, there could be some where he does more work than others, but it's not how his
I feel like every once in a while he writes his own whatever it is. Like maybe one book a year. The rest of those, no.
No. Well, I mean, and if you figured out how to make your name an empire,
yeah,
like props.
Yeah.
Go for it. Although his YA imprint did crash, which I find funny.
It still exists, but he only publishes his own books.
Yeah.
Not anybody else's.
Be Rick Riordan, who started an imprint that publishes like
other people,
authentic voices for doing like, you know, the mythology that is actually theirs.
Yeah. Listen, we want to read Percy Jackson. Hopefully we'll do it this year because like we're big fans of what Rick Riordan is doing, letting people talk about their own mythologies from their own culture.
You guys can't see it because it's dark as heck in here, but that right there, that is the Percy Jackson box set, which I bought during the initial stage of the pandemic. This is how long we have been talking about this. So eventually we're going to get to it.
My copies are in the orange books, which are just off screen. They're over there because I have the fancy new covers that came out when they announced the new movie, TV show, whatever it is. You get it.
I mean, I think just to like close the video, I think that there's just a lot about this, and again, like there could be something underlying all of this that just makes a lot of sense, or it could quite possibly just be that like everybody has their own ideas about where and when a pseudonym is going to work, and that's why it doesn't make sense, is because different publishing houses or different people have different goals in mind, which is fine, and that's a fine answer, but I just think it is just really funny, the differences. And I really just feel like I have kind of gotten to a space where I'm like, is the name on the book the name of the actual person who wrote it? And it's not like it has to be, like you can use a pseudonym, that it's fine.
Yeah.
But I feel like in the age of like where we are right now, we're just like, what is reality? It is just also kind of feeding into that a little bit.
AI author.
Kind of uncomfortable. And like I said, like if I like a writer, I like a writer.
Yeah.
And if they are going to write a genre that I don't want to read,
you just don't read
it.
Yeah.
But I might, in some ways, also be more willing to try something I might not normally try if I am confident that the person who wrote it has written a book in the past that I really enjoyed. So sometimes I just find, like Michaela said, there are significant reasons why you would do it, but there are some times where I'm just like, just put your name on it.
Yeah.
I will read what you write.
Yeah.
You could write an ode to a paper bag. Like, I'll read it. Just put your name on it. I have to know that it's you.
And like, obviously, all of these authors that we've talked about, where we're like, we know who the pseudonym is, it's not like they're hiding that that's their pseudonym. Like, you can go to Shannon McGuire's website and she has the Mira Grant books listed there as hers. She has the A. Deborah Baker book listed there as hers. Like, it's not like she's explicitly trying to like stay hidden and be secret about it. It's more so of like, not everybody is going to go digging that far, right? Like, you just see that author and you know that you've read that author before. Like, not everybody reads the author bios. A lot of people don't really care. Authors don't get really recognized on the street unless, again, you're Stephen King or, I don't know, James Patterson. His face is giant on the back of the book. So, like...
Danielle Steele,
again.
Has the most tasteful, full portraits of herself on the back of the books. Love it.
Who needs to know what the book is about? Danielle Steele. It's fine. Like, that's not how writing works. Like, it's an art. Like, you kind of fade away. So I get it, but I also don't get it. Like, I do, but I don't. But I do. but I don't.
Welcome to Betwixt the Books Discuss, where we discuss something for like 30 plus minutes and tend to at the end be like, yeah, we don't know.
Yeah, no idea.
Yeah, we just have thoughts, guys.
Thoughts and opinions, are they correct? No.
I don't think you expected us to like solve the problems of the world in the space of this video, but hopefully it was slightly entertaining. And I think we actually name dropped also quite a few books like in this that you might be interested in reading. Some of them we have reviewed on the channel, others we haven't, some we plan to. So I think this worked out quite well, and like giving you some of our content you can go back and check out, or maybe some upcoming content that we will eventually get to as the light slowly fades from my entire life. I think it's probably time for us to go. So thank you so much. We hope to do more discusses in the future, just because like we talked about last time, they're easier for us to do and we enjoy them, and life is hard. So we will see you there for the next one. Thanks, guys. Bye.